All right, welcome everyone. This is Kristen Vincent, Chair of the Westborough School Committee speaking. Today is Wednesday, October 7th, 2020. I call the meeting of the Westborough School Committee to order. Thank you for joining us this evening at this remote live stream school committee meeting. Due to the impacts of the COVID-19 virus, some aspects of the open meeting law have been suspended. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Westborough School Committee is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceeding as provided for in the order. Town officials and Westborough TV have worked together to hold this meeting via televideo conference and broadcast it as such on Westborough TV's government channels, Verizon 28 and Charter 192, and streamed online at www.westboroughTV.org/live-stream-government, or on the Westborough TV YouTube channel for persons who would like to listen to or view this meeting while it's in progress. Any votes we take this evening will be roll call votes due to the remote participation. If you would like to speak at a school committee meeting during the citizens request portion of the meeting, please email your request to school-committee@westboroughk12.org or email the chair, that's me, directly at vincentk@westboroughk12.org. Thank you to Westborough TV for covering the broadcast tonight, and we hope that we can have power during our entire broadcast tonight. And as a reminder, a recording of this meeting can be accessed from the Westborough TV website or the YouTube channel anytime after the meeting. We have with us tonight Superintendent Amber Bach, Assistant Superintendent Dr. Daniel Mayer, Director of Finance and Administration Irene Oliver. Steve Durrett will be joining us. He's the Vice Chair of the Westborough School Committee. He's just trying to dial in. We have school committee members Sarah Dulé, Lisa Edinburgh, and Raghu Nandan. We are super excited that we have our student school committee representative here. Kyla Kamugu is here, and she'll be observing this meeting, and then she'll serve as our student representative. So we look forward to hearing from her. Jen Benton is here. She's our school committee recording secretary. And also on the call is Bob Ferguson. He's the director of buildings and grounds, and he'll be sharing with us later in the meeting. Peter Dunbeck from the Climate Action Plan Task Force will be joining us for a presentation around 6:30. And we have staff from Westborough TV who are handling the live stream and the recording of this meeting. Our agenda for this evening is as follows. We will begin with an approval of minutes from September 23rd regular session. We will have a superintendent's report and reports from the assistant superintendent and the director of finance and administration. We will have school committee member reports, and then we will hear any building project updates. Next on our agenda is citizens requests, but we don't have any of those tonight. Then we'll hear an update presentation from the Climate Action Plan, or the CAP task force, which is the town committee. Then we will have COVID-19 update, an impact update, which will include a review of our data dashboard. We'll be looking ahead to winter sports and how the season might unfold. And we'll have an update on our transportation contract. We will look at our 5-year capital planning document and hear an update around that. We will vote on the MASC resolutions for the 2020 annual meeting. We'll see a draft of the superintendent's goals for the school year, and we will have an executive session tonight. So we will begin with an approval of our minutes from September 23rd regular session. Is there a motion to approve these minutes?
I can make a motion to, oh, sorry, Raghu, you can go.
I move the motion to approve the minutes from last session on September 23rd.
Thank you, Raghu. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Sarah. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Okay, we will take a roll call vote on these minutes. We'll start with Sarah.
Dulé, yes.
Raghu.
Nandan, yes.
Lisa?
Edinburgh, yes.
And Vincent, yes. And so that would be 4 and 1 member absent at this time. So those are approved. Thank you. So I will turn it over to Amber for words from our superintendent.
I think that's Steve.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is good to see Mr. Durrett arriving into our meeting. Kyla, it's a pleasure to welcome you. We really feel that until we have our student representative, that the work of the district really hasn't fully begun. And we really gave Mr. Callahan time to give us somebody. He wanted to really vet the process. And with our slow start, we want you to know how pleased we are to have you with us. So I look forward to meeting with you and helping you kind of figure out the important role you play as our student voice. One of my updates tonight, Bobby Sullivan, the Department Head of World Languages, and Jackie Coelho, one of our faculty members of English language learners, they work collaboratively to host the Seal of Biliteracy, which is a really important recognition of our support in district to have multilingual students who embrace the idea of acquiring as many languages as possible with the capacity to develop them more fully through the ways they head off to life after us, as well as while they're living with us in school. To get the Seal of Biliteracy, 10% of their graduating seniors in 2020 are bilingual or trilingual. It's quite an honor. Only 23 districts in Massachusetts, of which there are over 300, receive this honor. We received this high honor. I'm exceptionally pleased that this is a part of the work that we are developing more deeply in Westborough. It also has a nice cross departmental focus, and I think really is something where over the last 2 years, I think it's 3 years, Daniel, we've done it. We've really developed some very nice traction in this bilingual seal. It does go on the graduation diploma as well for those that acquire it. So it's a really nice honor. I also wanted to acknowledge that we were able to hold the senior parade. We modified it such that we could bring in seniors in groups and have them march in small clusters and to have the opportunity to come together and mark the start of their year. I think that like all of the pieces that we'll have this year, I want to acknowledge that they need to be modified and tempered against social distancing, mask wearing, and protocols. And so at each time we come to important milestones, we want to hold on for all of our students across district for different important events. We'll be trying to reconceptualize them so that they can be implemented this year. And I think that a lot of seniors, I got the sense, and Kyla, I would certainly happy to have you comment as well if you would like, but they, I think, really enjoyed the chances to start to see each other and at least feel some sense of class. And I don't know if you want to add anything, Kyla. It was busy.
It was really different this year because last year we saw them all like run across the streets and be all happy, but we are really glad that we got to have our senior parade in the modified form that we did.
Yeah, thank you. I just a shout out to the senior class presidents and leadership team. They've really been collaborating with Mr. Callahan as last year's seniors did so that they can voice to us the cares of the class and what they want to try to achieve, what they hold as important. And then we're deeply committed to making sure that everything we can maintain this year within those protocols will be achieved. So I'm really pleased with how it went. And that's my report for tonight.
Thank you. And Daniel, do you have anything you'd like to share in your report tonight?
Well, 2 things, I guess. One is this is our first week of full hybrid, and the teachers were very thankful to, be sort of getting going. They felt like the first couple of weeks in the quarter hybrid, while necessary to get acquainted with the students and make them feel comfortable, they also were feeling eager to get, sort of pick up the pace a bit. So the mood was very upbeat this week in terms of being able to greet all the students. Also, I want to reiterate what I mentioned at last meeting about the Westborough Connects and the Westborough Public Schools are going to be sponsoring. I'm going to share my screen for a minute. Katie Greer, who's going to be who's a speaker who specializes in talking about tech safety and digital citizenship. And she's going to be making her presentations both to our students on days when they're remote. So it's going to be not what she's going to do it virtually, and for both the remote students and the hybrid students when they're at home. She's going to run on the both workshops on Wednesday, the 21st, and on Thursday, the 22nd during the day. And then in the evening at 6:30 p.m., if you go to the westboroughconnects.org page, you can find information out about how you can join in and talk about, listen to her talk about how to keep your children safe online and make sure that they understand what it means to be a good digital citizen. She's a nationally known expert. We were going to have her in the spring. As you can see, it says rescheduled. We really think that it's going to be she's very entertaining as well as very informative and practical. And so I just encourage people to tune into that. So that's my update.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Irene, do you have anything you want to share now?
I don't have anything right now.
We'll be hearing from you later.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. So we will move to our school committee member reports. So I'll start with Sarah.
Thank you. I just want to welcome Kyla also. It does feel more complete now to have our student rep back. So thank you for joining us, and look forward to hearing from you at our meetings. I'm kind of like Daniel. I have the same announcements that I had the last time. Today is International Walk to School Day. So I did see a couple kids out there walking to school, but it's actually International Walk to School Month. So feel free to walk, bike, or roll to school. And if you do, send a picture to Safe Routes to School. I know that the elementary schools put out some information about it, so you can look in the weekly news and notes for that. And my second update is the turkey trot is happening, remote and virtual. It's a free range turkey trot. And the information is on the website and the Turkey Trot Facebook page. So we hope everyone joins us again this year. So those are my announcements.
Thank you. I saw the turkey got an update with a mask, so he's ready to go, or she is ready to go.
Ready to go. Socially distant, make your own route, pick your hills, toe hills. Yeah.
Daniel's going to keep it flat this year. I know it.
Definitely. Maybe just all downhill, actually.
Perfect. All right. Well, that'll be great. I look forward to. I just made a note to sign up for the turkey trot. So thanks, Sarah. Raghu, do you have anything to share tonight?
Yes. Welcome, Kyla. Look forward to hearing from you and participating with you on the school committee meetings. One thing that I wanted to share is from what I heard this morning. I shared some slides with Daniel this morning. I attended a cybersecurity conference. Cybersecurity is on top of my mind. Last year, or sometime in October, when I talked to our IT director, I did have a conversation with him, and I came away saying, okay, if our data is stolen, we do have a solid backup. We can restore the backup and get going. It seemed from the story of a case of a school district in the South that the FBI agent was talking about during the cybersecurity summit. It was really scary. So what happened in the school district, he did not name one, but he did say it was a school district in the South. These hackings are getting more and more sophisticated. Usually what used to be is they would have a random attack. They would shut down your computers and say, there's a ransom that I want to get paid. And once you get paid, they would release your computers. Not anymore. according to the FBI agent, mafia's getting involved. When they get involved, more money is there, more sophistication comes in place. So what they do is they hack in and they sit tight for months, and that's what they did in the Southern School District. They hacked in somewhere around March, and the attack did not happen till July. So when they demanded a ransom, the school district and the town refused to pay. And then if you see the second slide, during this time, what they did is they captured all the information for, about the teachers, about the students, the social security numbers, how much they make, the address, any personal information. They captured all of that, and they leaked it into this dark website to say, if you don't pay us the ransom, we will leak it internet wide. And the original ransom was in a couple of $1 million. When the town refused, they leaked it, and then all of a sudden the ransom became tens of millions. They knew that they had that community in a compromising position. So, and then the community had to pay, and then they gotten so sophisticated that they sent a certification of destruction to the community, and it's supposed to be authentic. I don't know how, but these are all criminals, and this is supposed to be somewhat of authentic certificate to say, okay, they will, according to the FBI agent, they will destroy, because they don't want to lose the confidence that if the ransom gets paid, on the other end, the deal is not held up. So they will take care of those things. But he said they are going after usually the businesses where the business is making about $100 to $200 million, and they don't have sophisticated security environment. They don't try to hack into Fidelity, because they know it's going to be really hard to hack into Fidelity. But they go after these smaller businesses, and especially some towns who are, they don't go after, they're really sophisticated in collecting the data. They go after somewhat of a, those towns who can pay the ransom. Let me put it that way. They don't go after small towns who cannot pay the ransom. So they look at all the data before they decide who they're going to go after. So having said that, that case really scared me. I wanted to bring that case forward for us to know, we need to be really vulnerable, careful on that vulnerability. We need to be really careful, and we need to take steps, whatever it takes. There was a few, it was a 3-hour summit. I don't want to go through the whole thing, but these were the highlights, and we need to take some steps.
Yeah, thanks. That is both fascinating and terrifying at the same time. And I know that you had met with, I think maybe John Green and some other tech people last year, just to kind of think through some of those security. And definitely, I know the town side is also always looking to protect vital information that we have on our computers. So thank you. That's definitely something for all of us to be aware of.
Raghu, did you send the presentation to John? Did they share it with you, or were you taking screenshots?
No, I sent some slides of the presentation to Daniel, and Daniel, please I've asked, Tom Doyle was the FBI agent's name. I exchanged some emails with him, and he gave me the permission to share the slides. Okay. So Daniel, please feel free to share those with John, and he can call me anytime. There were some things that were shared during the 3-hour presentation about some steps that FBI recommends.
Sure.
And these are all coming from, most of the times it comes, and there's some processes that FBI recommends. Not all of them involve a lot of work. It's just best practices, and
So Daniel,
that has to be done school-wide.
yeah, so Daniel and I will, I think logically, vigilance on these discussions to make sure we're staying current on those pieces annually is helpful. So I think Daniel and I will debrief John and maybe circle him back to be in contact with you, because you'll probably be able to best explain the context and start there. And we'll just make sure that it's an annual piece of you should go to the conference annually, and then you can remember to cue us, because exactly. All right. Exactly. So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And because of COVID and everybody working remotely, these hacking attacks have increased 250%, just to give you a context.
Thank you. Thanks. Lisa in the dark, do you have anything you'd like to share tonight?
My internet is very unstable and I might disappear, but I just wanted to welcome Kyla, and that is all I have for this evening. I'm very excited that we have a liaison, and I'm sure it'll be great to see her during our meetings and hear the updates. Thanks. That's all.
Thank you. Thanks. Steve, do you have anything to share now? Do you want to wait till building project updates?
See if you're muted, Steve. I'm seeing if I can unmute you.
Okay. How's that?
Hi, Steve. Hi.
Hi there.
I can hear you.
Yeah. I'll wait until the next step.
Okay. Thanks. And I have just a few things to share for my report. I just want to thank everyone who came out to the special town meeting that was held last Tuesday, September 29th at the high school. It was a great turnout, and it was good to see people come out in support of those articles. And as a reminder, there will be a special fall town meeting, which is usually our annual fall town meeting. This year it'll be Saturday, November 7th, 9 a.m. at the high school, with social distancing and mask wearing in place. And just wanted to let the community know that the high school track is now open. The track has been repaired. The lines have been all repainted. It looks beautiful. It looks so, so nice. So that's back open to the community. And just as a reminder that there will be times that the track will close when students are out using it either during the day for PE classes or in the afternoons and evenings for practices and games. So just be aware that sometimes the track won't be open to the public because it's being used by students. Oh, Lisa, congratulations. She's got her power back. Great. All right. So we're going to move on to building project updates. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Steve.
Okay. My microphone is so hopefully it's loud enough.
Steve, it's really hard to hear you, right? Steve.
Normally I call in the telephone. I can't do that. I can't get that in. So, just let me try, I guess, and we'll see what happens next.
Okay. Just
anyway, we had a little question about issue associated with there, which became part of a discussion the construction that failed. But the good news is that the protecting complete, and they'll be on to the roof decking area.
Steve.
They continue with the electrical function at base level, and let's see.
Steve, we're having a really hard time hearing you.
Okay, well, I can't do any better without calling in on the telephone, which is what I've done before. So I guess we'll call it a day, and I'll continue as well.
Okay. That sounds good. And if you have anything that the committee needs to know, you can just shoot us an email. But yeah, it sounds like you're very, very far away. So, and I know that over on Mill Road, there's some power issues at the top of your road. So
I will note too, because I was at the meeting with Steve today, I think they're making good progress. One of the notes I would make is that they're moving towards starting to drill the geothermal wells, and we put out communications to the community about that. We're also working on organizing for parking for the workers in ways that we can utilize busing, and Steve provided an update on that at our last meeting. He's continuing to push that forward with organized progress. I would say that we're on time in the project, and under Steve's leadership, continuing to keep the project on point. So that will be the update for tonight.
great, thank you. Yep, lots of work going on over there. All right, so next on our agenda is citizens' requests, but we do not have any tonight. So we're going to move on, and we're going to welcome Peter Dunback here from the Climate Action Plan Task Force Committee to share an update. And Peter has a presentation for us, so welcome.
Thank you.
So before I turn it over to Peter really quickly, and I think he'll share his screen, I want to welcome him as a chair of a really dynamic committee in Westborough, and that is working towards helping Westborough be in the curve, not ahead, not behind, but in the curve of changes at the state level around goals and targets for being net zero by 2050.
Yes.
And that can't just be that we wake up in 2045 and try to figure out how to do that. And with Peter's guidance and work from a variety of committees and the blessing of the selectmen and the work of his team, they have started to put together a cap proposal. And now, after a tremendous amount of work, it's quite a dynamic committee, I have to say. I really enjoy the small piece I contribute there, but they are really incredibly talented and are developing these proposals and are now ready to come forward and present them to all the boards. I just want to say, as we welcome Peter, that I think this committee understands that they have to plug into every board, committee, and network in Westborough and begin to articulate the vision of being a net zero community and what it will take for us. So his presentation tonight echoes the messaging that he's carrying across the community, and he's already been to several boards, and I look forward to having him tonight. So Peter, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Amber. And thank you for your ongoing support of the work of the committee. I will try to share my screen. If we'll see if looks like it's working. So as you may recall, this task force was set up as a result of a town meeting warrant article last fall and was commissioned under the direction of the town manager, Christie. And we have 11 members. And as Amber said, it's a very talented group, and I'm privileged to be the chair of that effort. And the work you'll be seeing is the result of many hands from that task force. The environment we're in the state is very dynamic in the sense of there's a very high level of commitment to address climate change and the causes of climate change as from the state of Massachusetts. And the science keeps getting more and more urgent. And so the goals actually continue to change. And there's many of the details of that in regard to policies and interim metrics like the 2030 goals, which are in flux as we speak. And so we're going to be talking some about that. But the result of that is this has got to be a living plan. It can't be a one-time plan that we publish and it's good for the next 30 years. So what you're seeing is a starting point on a journey that's going to take a long time and a lot of effort. But I do feel very good about where we've started. You may recall from the spring, we formalized our climate action plan goal, and it is to create a document that will guide the entire community. So this isn't just municipal emissions, but it's the entire community, residents and businesses. And it's to do our fair share of the state goals, which are embodied in the Global Warming Solutions Act. The key metrics that were in place at that time were 40% greenhouse gas emissions reduction by 2030 and 80% reduction by 2050. But at the time, we knew things were changing. And so I'm going to have some update on some of the dynamics of that change. But first, I wanted to do a report on the inventory of our greenhouse gas emissions and what are the major sources of those emissions. And we have this broken down by technology sectors: transportation, building, heating, electricity, and then kind of another category of waste, land, and other, like off-road vehicles. You can see that 83% of the emissions from Westborough come from 4 categories. Residential vehicles is the largest subcategory, and then commercial and industrial, electricity and heating are the 2 next, and then the 4th of the 4 top categories is the residential heating. So these 4 categories provide the focus for our activities going forward. The way we generated this, I should have said, was from a tool that the state has developed through the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, Metropolitan Area Planning Council, which is has a tool for municipalities, and it creates this greenhouse gas inventory using available records from state databases, Department of Transportation, tax records, and so forth, census information. It's important that we compare ourselves, and we use a rigorous methodology, and that's the source we're using. One of the changes that happened kind of very early in the spring, Governor Baker changed the goal of the Global Warming Solution Act to net zero by 2050. And then in April, that was finalized into a formal executive order. Beyond that, both the House and the Senate have generated new climate bills that are very extensive. And these are have basically 2 functions. One is they accelerate the goals. They increase the amount of reduction that's needed by each date, 2030, 2040. They also have policies and programs to fund the changes that are needed. The how to get to these aggressive goals is built on a collaborative effort with people from all different sectors: business and the energy, the utility companies, academics, and this is the Implementation Advisory Committee. So in August, the Implementation Advisory Committee of the state had put together these metrics for 2030, and it shows the range of types of changes that are needed. New building codes to drive energy use intensity, energy efficiency, heat pumps, electric vehicles in a more aggressive rate of change in regard to adoption of renewable energy. And I'll just highlight a couple of them because there's a bunch of numbers on this slide. One of the metrics that they're proposing is 1 million heat pumps statewide in households. That represents 40% of the households in the next decade will have electric heat pumps to heat their house. And this will dramatically reduce the amount of fuel oil, as well as reducing the amount of natural gas used in the state for heating. There's also a proposal for 1 million electric vehicles, which represents 23% of the vehicles registered in Massachusetts at this time. So again, these are really remarkably aggressive goals for just 10 years, a dramatic change in the environment. These are proposals. They're still in the public hearing phase, and the basically the executive branch, the administration of the state, needs to memorialize these into a clean energy and climate plan and finalize the emission limits for 2030. And that work is going to play out until March of 2021, which is relevant to us because that's also the deadline for our climate action plan. So where this proposal is being generated, changing basically a lot of the goals, also bringing in new programs, it's happening at the same time we're developing our plan, which is very supportive of what we're trying to do. The climate action plan is built at basically these three levels. The high level, net zero by 2050 climate action plan goal. And then we have a series of sector goals, 17 of them. And those sector goals are in different technology spaces like electricity, transportation, building, heating, and so forth. Underneath each of those sector goals, we have developed strategies for how to achieve those. And there's 50 strategies we've identified. These are kind of first release products of the committee, and this community outreach that this meeting and many others are part of is to gain feedback from the community of whether this is going in the direction that the town of Westborough anticipates and wanted when they voted for the Climate Action Plan Task Force, and to gain that feedback. So I'm looking forward to any feedback you have on that. I have a high-level summary of the sector goals that I'll talk to briefly here. But there was a detailed presentation that was in your briefing package, which goes into more detail. And I advise you, if you're interested, please review that and give us feedback on that, on any of this, on the high level or the detailed document. So I want to zoom in on these 5 areas of the sector goals. And the 4 that have black letters are the ones that are the most dramatic, most important in regard to changing the greenhouse gas emissions in the 4 sectors that were identified on the first slide on the greenhouse gas inventory slide. If you look at the building, heating, and transportation, the main change we have to implement is the electrification of those sectors, stopping the use of fossil fuels and going to electric solutions, electric vehicles and heat pumps, essentially, for all of the heating systems. The electricity, we need clean sources. We need carbon-free sources of electricity, renewable and other carbon-free sources. With those are the main levers that we have to really change our greenhouse gas emissions. The state is very much aligned with this. We're taking advantage of the research and the work and the programs that are coming from the state. Energy efficiency helps reduce the cost of implementation. Energy use disclosure informs the process. Public transportation is more important in the bigger cities, but there's opportunity in Westborough. And biking and pedestrian also reduces the amount of vehicle traffic. And protection of open space and an increase in trees and forest is a great way to sequester carbon emissions and offset whatever remaining emissions exist. The other 2 in the highlighted section are staffing and national grid alignment. As we shift to an all-electric energy solution, we're very dependent on the national grid infrastructure, and our expectation is that they know all of this transition is coming, and we can be very effective partners with them. We can learn about what programs they have, what they're looking to do to change the distribution and transmission network that supports Westborough as we go to distributed supply of electricity and potentially storage. So it's really important for us, we believe, to ensure that all of our tactical activities are fully aligned with National Grid, and we take advantage of their program and their technical expertise. In the staffing, and staffing should kind of be in quotes because it includes volunteer committees, all of the committees in town, as well as the existing town staff. This climate action plan is going to need to be managed on an ongoing basis. There's a lot of follow-up activity that's going to be needed in order to make this happen. And we need to have a roles and responsibility pretty well delineated, and have an ongoing discussion around the responsibilities within the town to ensure that this gets executed. We have reviewed town plans from other towns, and some of them have sat on the shelf for 10 years because they didn't do enough work in the staffing and roles and responsibility space. So it's a key area for us. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. Here's an example of some of the detail that's in the bigger package. And again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but each of those goals, like electrification of buildings, we've elaborated what exactly electrification means and a series of program strategies that we anticipate for the first few years to be the focus of our effort. What I'd like to do is to kind of open it up to discussion, but also to put up some ideas, some issues that the Westborough schools could play in this climate action plan. The schools represent some of the largest municipal buildings in town, and the reduction in greenhouse gas emission associated with those buildings is a great opportunity. And I highly commend this group, the school committee and the school administration, for the decisions on fails. And I think it's exemplary. And I've used it in discussions with other towns as an example of a leadership project. I think that also allows us to approach commercial and industrial builders in town and have a case study that's right in town that we can use as an example. The emissions from school buses and other pollutants from the school buses, I think, are a great opportunity for us. There has been some effort with the Volkswagen settlement and some other state programs to do some pilots on electric school buses, and I'm sure there's going to be more of that coming in the next few years. I think we should look at building out greater solar on the rooftops of the schools and potentially parking lot canopies. I think there's operational things we could do with composting and recycling. Obviously, education is your core mission, and climate education, I think, is a core issue that we need to keep building greater awareness and understanding of the issues of climate change and the types of technologies needed for solutions in our young people as they get out in the workplace and they become voters. And I think it's very key activity that we need to include. Also, the schools are the primary contact to many of the families in town. And so as we're looking for means of communicating programs and opportunities and events associated with the climate action plan, I'd love to have a partnership with the schools and your principals' newsletters and parent-teacher associations and whatever means possible to ensure that as many families as possible are aware of our activities. So I'll stop there. I think that's my last slide. And open it up for questions.
Thank you so much. So I'll turn it over to any committee members who might have questions or comments for Peter.
This is Raghu, and I've attended some of the meetings that Peter hosted, and I've seen firsthand how committed the entire committee of that Peter's committee is. They're really committed, and we should support them wholeheartedly. having said that, it's going to be a good thing for the town and hopefully for the entire state when the state can achieve that goal of net zero by 2050. Couple of observations from the school buses. Is there a way where we can ask the NRT to see if they have, what are their plans on electrification of their buses, and get that information? And also for the next renewal, I suggest that there should be a target of number of buses or percentage of buses that has to be electric buses as a qualification marker. We need to take leadership in this. The climate change is for real, and we need to be ahead of this. And if we can achieve net zero as a town in 2040, not 2050, that would be that should be our goal. Like Amber said, we just can't be in the curve. We should be aggressive and be ahead of the curve. Also, one more thing that it always bothers me when I see the traffic on West Main Street, how much emissions that there's going on with the vehicles moving at 5 miles an hour. If as a town we can do something about it, it really helps reduce, because like Peter's slide said, 83% comes from residential vehicular emissions. We should do, other than electrification helps, but not everybody can go buy electric vehicles. So there's that part too. So we need to rethink our traffic on West Main Street especially. And it's not just inconvenience anymore, it's polluting the air. So thanks, Peter, for all the good work, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, traffic is an issue for everybody. And I know the town is always looking at that. But I feel like I do see more and more electric vehicles, at least hybrid vehicles out there. There's more and more electric charging stations going in different gas stations and supermarket plazas. And that makes me think that those stations wouldn't be there unless there were more electric vehicles around. I would be curious to know what bus companies locally are using any electric vehicles. It just would be interesting to know. I see Irene shaking her head. I understand that they're probably super expensive, or the technology just hasn't caught up to that size of a vehicle yet. But Raghu has an interesting point about moving forward, keeping our eye on that and thinking about maybe that becomes a push from, if enough school districts are pushing for something like a percentage of the fleet being electric, that could definitely drive what happens.
It's a dynamic environment, and I would say there's already a city in China with 30,000 buses that are all electric. So the entire fleet of 30,000 buses has been electrified. So when there's a will, it can be done. It's there is a premium to be paid, but then there's maintenance savings. I drive an electric vehicle, and sorry, my phone ringing. And the total maintenance is rotating the tires and changing the wipers. There is no, I mean, it's a much more efficient system. They are more expensive, and particularly in the buses, they're more expensive. That's understood. However, the state was willing to buy a bus for 5 different cities. Only 4 applied. We could have gotten an electric bus a couple of years ago, and we didn't even apply.
Yeah, and it's I know some school systems own their buses, and then they have, they manage the whole thing from inside internally with bus drivers and everything. And then systems like us, we contract with a bus company, and so we get what the bus company provides. So sometimes we don't always have control over the types of vehicles that we're getting. Irene, I didn't know if you had anything to add to that.
Well, I know that Steve and I were on a panel several years back at O'Keefe, and the same subject was there, and we had a discussion about the same issue. And I don't know, Steve, if you remember that, if you can add to this, but there's a lot of factors that contribute to this. And like you said, Pete, it is expensive. I didn't know that we could apply for a bus with the state. Had I known that, maybe we could have worked with the company and possibly, tried it out and to see how it worked. We certainly want to be conscious of emissions and all of that. So, like I said, and like you said, Kristen, it is up to the company, and it is costly. It's very costly, and I don't know that production would have enough buses for us to supply. And the other consideration, and I'm not trying to poo-poo this whole thing, and I'm all for green environment, so don't get me wrong, but we have to have stations that are set up within the town that will, bring in electricity for charging these buses at night. And then, we have to consider how far out these vehicles go. So maybe it's just the big buses that we, consider versus the, special needs buses that might have to travel in, further distances. So it's not that we wouldn't consider it. It's just that there's surrounding things we have to consider when looking at this. And when you say that maybe at the next NRT contract, so far we're just into like a couple months of the contract with them, and they've been very amenable. Maybe there's a way we can introduce something like that just to test it out and pilot it. It seems like they would be willing to do that possibly. I don't know. So it's not like we wouldn't be willing to look into it. So we can work with you, Pete. And I of course I have to work with the superintendent and the school committee to see if that's where we want to go.
Well, I think it's an in-depth presentation that Pete sent you. And I guess I would encourage everyone that's on the very first pass here. We could go on a long, extensive amount. These meetings are really in depth around all of the strategies that they're developing. So it feels to me, and again, Pete, I think your goal for us was to learn tonight and to begin to dig more deeply into the strategies and the 17 overarching goals and to provide feedback to the committee. And so I would encourage us to study it a little bit and then to either call Pete or me or somebody else on the committee or email him the thinking about the feedback, because I think you'll find each of them have different avenues where we can find traction around participation.
Kristen, sorry, I have a couple of comments from Steve, whose audio isn't working, and he's texting me. Now I have 3. So he's very interested. He just can't get there. So first of all, he said that Fails will have electric plugins for buses and cars. So that's being built in to the plan now. And this is also regarding Fails, the national grid upgrade cost for Fails is $344,000 plus the cost of the system not supported by the MSBA. So I think that's, Irene, goes to your point of how much it is to transfer everything over, but built into the cost of Fails, obviously that's productive for the future. And then his other question or comment was how, maybe this is for you, Pete, how new generation is required to convert heating from oil to heat pumps. That's what he said. I'm not sure exactly if that makes sense to you, Pete.
There's two, and I think Steve probably is aware of this, but there's 2 types of residential heat pumps in regard to whether they're kind of partial, like a room-centered mini split style, or a central heating system. If you have a forced air system already, you can go to a central transitions, a heat pump that is designed for replacement of the fossil fuel furnace, gas or oil, and you can put the hot air into the existing duct system and air handling system. If you have hot water, then you need to you have to put in ductwork to handle that, or you go to mini splits that are more room by room or sector of your house by sector. I'm not sure if that's what he was asking, but.
I asked if any follow-up. He hasn't put back yet. I know a lot of people are installing the mini splits as a way to get the air conditioning as well. So yes. I know in New England it's tough when you don't have the AC in the summer. Yeah, I don't think Steve has any more. And thank you. I agree with everyone else. I appreciate all your work and for bringing this forward to us, because there's definitely things that we can do when we have a big reach. So we're happy to help.
Yeah,
Cool. Sorry, Steve's question is, where does the electricity come from?
It comes from the same places that the electricity for lighting comes from. It comes from either the grid, or if you have solar on your roof, it comes from the solar on the roof. If it comes from the grid, it comes from the combination of sources that you're buying from, and you can pick your own supplier. And if you've chosen Westborough Power Choice greener option, which we just launched last month, you get 100% carbon-free electricity into your home.
Okay.
One thought is I'm listening to the discussion, and kind of it's along the theme of what Raghu was suggesting. Is it'd be interesting maybe for a 6-month or a year horizon, not like in the next month or something, if the schools could have some policies about how you're responding to these challenges, like all future schools will be built to net zero, electric school buses will be implemented by X date, whatever and try to develop some school-centered policies for how you see your role, and have it driven internally by your own understanding of your budgets and processes and needs and so forth, and using resources like ourselves, like the Sustainable Westborough Group or the Climate Action Plan folks, as resources to help inform that policy building. That would be one thought. It's kind of in the theme of what Raghu was starting to put a couple of planks up.
Yeah, so this is Bob. I just have a quick question and an observation. I know you mentioned China has been very proactive in providing electrically fueled buses in China.
Yep.
And I know the ambitious plan that you put forward, or the commission or your committee's been putting forward, is very good. And I'm all for green power myself. But in China, the difference is that they're building nuclear power plants, unlike the United States. So the electricity, whether it's fueled at your house with a heat pump or electric baseboard heat or your electric cars, the fuel has to come from somewhere, like Steve had mentioned.
Yep.
And usually it's carbon-based, and the emissions are still going to go up into the atmosphere. So I'm hoping that the country comes around and rethinks the nuclear power issue, because it's the safest with zero carbon emissions.
In my slide, I didn't say renewable energy. I said clean sources, to accommodate a diversity of clean sources. And I recognize that hydro and nuclear are also carbon-free sources. Both nuclear and hydro, particularly large hydro, have other environmental baggage, as you're well aware. So I think there is a role for different clean sources, and a lot of new technology coming out to make renewables and storage more suitable for baseload power.
I presume you're talking about solar and wind for the most part?
I tried to say, I'm talking about all of the clean sources, including hydro and nuclear, wind, solar, with battery storage for the intermittent renewable sources. And the state, again, is taking the lead in the definition of what those are. And on my slide where I had the Implementation Advisory Committee, down at the bottom was a set of acronyms, RPS and clean energy standard and stuff. So those are the standards the state is setting that will be implemented to Westborough, whether we like it or not. It's going to be statewide clean energy. Individuals or individual businesses like the municipality could buy 100% renewable sources beyond what the state is dictating as the average for the state.
Thanks, Pete. Appreciate it.
Lisa, one quick.
Yeah, so just to give you an idea, when the bus consultant came to us in last December, or November, we discussed electric buses, Steve and the bus transportation committee, and he only knew of one electric bus, school bus, and that was in Lexington, and it was a $300,000 price tag. But when I looked it up a couple of years ago, the average was $750,000 for a school bus, a big bus. So at the time when we were contemplating, should we own our own buses? Should we go for our next contract? Price tag wise, it just was not feasible. But I will, on the transportation committee, as we're meeting with NRT, ask that question, whether they have, any plans heading towards electric buses to see. And that's the truth about most districts, is they're dealing with 5-year contracts, mainly 5-year contracts with bus companies. And so it's really the bus companies, purview to head in that direction, but we can we can talk about it with them just to see where they're at.
The two ways the bus companies are going to change is having customers like us come and demand change, or the state putting regulations and saying they must change.
Right. One of our issues is really about, we put it out to bid, who bids, comes back to us, so that even that process would have to change. And that's okay too.
And I'm not, the numbers you quoted are the same numbers I'm aware of, and they need to be heavily subsidized to seed the market at this point. But over the next 10 years, I think there's going to be adoption, and the cost of batteries is dropping dramatically. And
the other one thing that you talked about, which really was interesting to me, is the solar panels in car parks. And during our last, the annual conference for school committee members, I went to a couple workshops specifically on that topic, and that felt the most doable because it's no dollars down. It's a revenue-based, solar panels in all the parking lots of schools, and it would create almost cover to the parking lot. And it was interesting. And that's the piece where, I don't know how the school committee feels about that, or Amber feels about that, or buildings and ground, Bob, those pieces of it. But to earn revenue at the same time of creating another source of our energy would be an interesting direction to go in. But we would look for maybe, a committee like yours to research it for us, to get some more information to see if that's a doable process in our lots. And, those companies do free reviews of school systems. And
so definitely something for us to consider. Yeah, so much. We can definitely help you, Pete, with communication. I know you had mentioned that, put you in touch with some parent groups. So just to get the word out to other people about your committee, people might not even know that this committee exists and the work that you're trying to do. And also what you had talked about, just thinking long-term, long range, some policies that maybe could sit and guide future planning. So Thank you so much for coming. You gave us a lot to look at and think about. We appreciate it. And we look forward to working with you and your committee. Thank you. All
Well, thank you very much for having me. Appreciate the feedback.
right. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. All right. Lots to think about there. So we'll move on in our agenda to our COVID-19 impact updates. We have a number of items under there. So Amber, I'll let you
So
take.
thank you. In order to keep us moving, I'll see if I can pick up a little time for us to keep us on point to your agenda. We'll try to share with you a general kind of touch base on our data dashboard, which is posted every Monday. So Daniel, if you want to pull that up quickly there. So the weekly posting of the data dashboard, if you'll scroll down, where are you? Yep, that's accurate right there, just so I can see that. This is always the summary we provide where we're working with our nurses, the Board of Health, and the building-based nursing and leadership team to track all of the cases of any symptoms, concerns, quarantining, and any positive cases. And I know that you saw that I pushed out a communication earlier this week that we have a student who is positive at the high school, and we had several students that were quarantining after we did contact tracing. And we're now in a holding pattern to kind of wait and get updates on other testing that has taken place. We did have a cycle of 3 positives several weeks ago, and we managed those with the quarantine. They were at Hastings and Gibbons, and those cases didn't lead into any other further cases. And as we come across them, we're working with the Board of Health to basically implement our protocols to make sure that we understand the process for both tracking, recording, and quarantining and interacting with families. I want to give a shout out to the nursing team, leadership team, and the Board of Health for their early phase of understanding how to manage the collaborative discussion and coordination that's taking to kind of iron out our protocols and to have everybody kind of play their role. A couple of questions that people on the board had sent me. There was a question about if you are a contact and you're asked to quarantine while you're waiting to see if the person you were in contact with is COVID positive, do all of your family members need to also quarantine? Now, the state guideline is that a sibling of a close contact, until the test data comes in, does not need to quarantine, but absolute safe best practice is to take the option to quarantine if you would like. And that varies based upon family and the students. You can't always manage that, but we're supporting that if that's the choice that a family would want to implement. Typically, the nurses will ask a series of questions like, do they share a bedroom? Do they share a bathroom? Are they, spending a lot of time like laying on the couch together watching movies, or are they siblings that are in a place where you feel like separate bathrooms, separate bedrooms, and overall that their contact has not, you feel, put them at lots of extensive risk? That's the range of questions we're asking. We have a similar loop where we ask that kind of set of questions with staff. Once a family member tests as positive, you become an immediate close contact and you must quarantine test and then complete your quarantine phase for 2 weeks. So I want to be reassuring to people they don't have to keep track of this. Whenever you get identified, and if you have a question, the nursing staff or the leadership team or the Board of Health is going to reach out to you with a personal call to give you guidance and to give you information. And if you have a question, you can call the school and speak to the nursing staff, or you can call the Board of Health. They encourage you to call the nursing staff first so you can get a quicker, easier answer. The Board of Health has to take care of the whole community. But I think that, again, in the protocol documents that we sent home under the safety protocol document, it's all laid out. And if you want to review that document, it's your best resource for kind of a quick review. But you can also call your building-based nurse. I think I'll keep you kind of abreast of these types of things as we come into them. I do anticipate we will see 1 or 2 more positive cases at the high school, given the size of the cohort that quarantined. but we'll follow the protocols, work with the Board of Health, and keep everybody updated, and of course, school committee very closely. I have a couple other, updates that I want to provide for you around that. For the sake of time, I'm going to keep us moving, but I don't want to leave that topic if you have any questions about that particular part of the update. Any? Or can I move on? Okay. Winter sports. So all of the components of implementing the school year, as we noted when we talked about the senior parade as an example, all require reinvention and new modifications in order to implement. Fall sports, you worked with us to get an update on what the MIAA was allowing. We're now currently implementing that. We worked through the protocols with the Board of Health, and we're now implementing the various opportunities of any range of fall sports. Winter is on the horizon, and we're now looking at what is MIAA providing in terms of guidelines for potential, and we're going to go through the exact same protocol. If you bring up that document for a moment, Daniel, the document piece that Johanna put together as far as a brief notation on winter sports is that there's two components that I want to update you on, which is we're set to go to the Board of Health the day on the 20th before our meeting on the 21st. So by protocol cycle, I hope to get your approval to kind of carry these notes forward to the Board of Health with Johanna and to go through those protocols. And then after they give us the feedback and hopefully their blessing on those parameters, we'll come back to you and you'd be able to then give it a final approval with any other adjustments you want to bring to it on that Wednesday. One of the things, and is it in there, Daniel? Can you open it or you can't?
It's open.
Oh, sorry.
Can other people see it?
Yep, got it. My bad.
Yeah.
I didn't shift
Sorry.
my screen. No, you're good. So the thank you. Sorry, I had my screen split funny.
Right.
So one of the important things is they'll continue with this concept of the pod season. They'll do a shortened season. They'll limit contact. And in some cases, we'll have to wait and see what we are able to implement if the site is not available to us. So winter sports has a whole series of additional layers and challenges. And so the one that I think I want to walk through with you tonight is to get your feeling about, in order for Johanna DiCarlo to plan with coaches and to bring this forward, is the 2 weeks that are remote after December and after Thanksgiving. Those basically would dismantle winter season if we don't come up with a protocol for them to participate in practice, even while we implement a school-based protocol of all remote. So the general practice that Johanna and I talked through would be to have members of winter teams, one, know that they could travel if they wanted to, but they would not be able to participate in practice when they return until they would get a clean COVID test, which would need to be submitted. And then they could return to practice. Two, they opt not to travel and they're automatically going to be able to cycle into practice, and they would have to fill out a form with all of that kind of general information. Three, if they have family members come from out of state, out of the space where the guidelines allow for free travel back and forth, they would need to go ahead and get a COVID test, and then they could cycle into practice. So I think Johanna and I are thinking that we would put together a protocol of options where people participating in winter sports would have a range of ways that if they wanted to participate in the 10 days of that voluntary practice cycle, and it would be voluntary with flexibility, following the protocols for practice, for those basketball players in particular to start participating in the guided practice. She would conduct, working with coaches, the tryouts during the week we return when it's a full week back. And then they would move into their shortened season of implementation. So I would like some targeted feedback from you tonight, if you feel comfortable, at least kind of in concept, talking about your thinking on that. You can continue to think about it and give us more feedback between now and when we go to the Board of Health. But if you have a sense of kind of your general feeling with that, I'd appreciate hearing from you so that I can then guide Johanna about how to, continue to modify our planning. So I would open it up for discussion there.
So I was just going to say the pieces about being tested in order to begin on December 7th or the January 4th are not actually in that memo. So but that was one of my questions. Could they just simply be tested? I think the one thing that comes to mind is that the coaches would not have the ability to, in other words, the amount of time it takes to test, would coaches not have the bandwidth to go out of state to visit family? And one of the reasons that's in place was for that purpose.
Yeah, well, I certainly think we would work with our coaches. It's important to us that they get that break. And I think certainly when I needed to travel to Ohio for my family business this summer, there is a protocol where you can get your test within 72 hours of your return, and it comes in really quickly. And I had my test within the 24 hours of my return, and I was ready to go. So the protocol is set up in such a way that you can manage acquiring your testing while you're away on your site, close as long as it doesn't eclipse more than, I think it's 72 hours before your return. So like I got tested Wednesday and came home Thursday night, and I got my result Friday night. So I think the testing cycle allows, and we would work with our coaches to travel. And if not, again, I think Johanna feels confident that she can manage that. Other questions? All of it requires a lot of heavy modification and flexibility, but, we're kind of leaning in on the concept that if we can find ways to manage all of this, when we leveled the MOU, we wanted to provide for the opportunities to travel, but then we just have to make sure that we have modifications that allow us to kind of keep everything running.
And I think it would be important to stress that those practices are optional.
Yep.
So it's nothing, it wouldn't be held against anyone leading into tryouts or anything like that. It's just optional to get people back into the sport. And I also understand heading into the winter sports season, we may see new guidance, different guidance from the state around certain sports that then would change, maybe some of the sports we're able to offer, how we offer them. But I think this is a workable framework for those 2 weeks that we want to make sure. The reason we're not having school, there's a reason that we're not holding school, that we're having people be remote for school and not come into school those 2 weeks, is to provide safety for everyone. And we want to make sure that that is maintained. So I think the testing protocol sounds like that could work. And I would be interested in getting, Board of Health opinions on that as well.
Right. So I figure we're better to arrive to them with good detail in place. So I'm thinking Johanna and I would draft a Google Doc, which we would use as a form that they would fill out, complete that protocol series. And so given the feedback, I'll work with her on it and with Brian to see if we can, set up a preliminary scaffold of what we would need to do. And you can see she's started the other pieces here for us to go and speak with them.
Sure. And to Lisa's point, it is important to include the coaches.
Yeah, they're built into this thinking as well. Definitely. Thank you.
I have
Go ahead, Raghu. Yep.
Yeah. One thing that I probably was missing, I was reading through this document, was what happens if somebody starts to show symptoms during the practice? What?
Right. So the protocol follows, again, based upon the guidelines that they put in place for the practice cycle, same as we're doing now with our other sports. They have to quarantine, test, and follow the close contact cycle. It might shut down the group they practice with. It might shut down the whole team for 2 weeks. I think that, for the guidelines as we implement them, the Board of Health will give us the parameters, and then the close contact tracing based upon how they're conducting their practice sessions would guide who would need to be able to quarantine. So I think we're taking it step by step and following, I think, the guidelines of the MIAA. They've really worked kind of at least think through the different types of scenarios that might happen. You see this going right now with, professional football season, as they're all trying, and baseball, as they've found their way through how to manage quarantining, testing, and isolation. So I think ours would have a similar feel. Other questions? This is good feedback. What I'm going to do is, if I hear in concept we can proceed, I'll continue to share the drafts that we develop with you, and then heading up to our participation in the Board of Health meeting on the 20th, Johanna and I will send you another update so you know what we're going to present and how we've refined any of these ideas. We'll get the feedback from the Board of Health. You can watch that meeting, and then we'll be back with you the next night. Okay, thank you.
Sounds good. Yeah.
All right, the other item of update there, Daniel's going to speak briefly about remote and hybrid changes and our work with there, and then Irene will put the transportation contract up.
Okay, so what Amber is referring to is we have to, by state law, give parents the option to be able to change between the remote program to the hybrid, or the hybrid to the remote. And we were clear at the beginning of the year that there would be points during the course of the year where we would make that available to parents, the option when it's not going to be. We want to minimize the disruption. Obviously, students going from one model to another frequently causes us problems in terms of class size, in terms of adjustment for the students. It's not optimal to be working with one teacher and then switching to work with another teacher in terms of their pacing and getting to know the kids and making sure that the students are, the more you know about your students, the more effective you are at teaching them. And so we're in the process of drawing up some guidelines that would be made public to about what would be the points during the course of the year that parents would need to notify us in order to make those changes. Our current thinking is to do it around term changes and give parents a window of something like 4 weeks before the term ends to let us know, because we have no idea if it ends up being 1%, 10%, 15, 20% that are making a change. They have drastically different impact in terms of what will happen, and parents will need to know that depending upon the size of the number of students that end up changing, it could affect even the students who are not changing in terms of class size and redistributing teachers to kids. So, hypothetically, if 25% of third grade shifts from hybrid to remote, we would have to take some of our hybrid teachers and move them over to remote, and then reshuffle the deck for the hybrid students. So it is a very complicated and very fraught issue. And we will be clear, and we'll need to leave a lot of lead time for our administrators to be able to make the decisions that they need with the staff and the students, so that the change can work. So I would anticipate by our next school committee meeting, I'll put before you, our guidelines. We're going to talk at leadership tomorrow with all the principals and the directors of curriculum, et cetera, about a draft of that and what are the key dates. And obviously there could be exceptions for students that we will build in, for families if they have a medical need, if there's a intense, unexpected educational issue that we need to address. And we will be clear in our guidance about those exceptions. So the exceptions, by that I mean being able to make a change at sort of in the midst of the of like the semester, rather than right at the end of the term or the semester. So that's our current thinking, and I'm willing to, obviously, I have questions you have right now. I'm willing to, answer anything you may have on your minds about that. You see the complexity.
Yeah, one change is the domino effect. So, yep.
Yeah, 1%, 5%, that's fine, probably. But so anyhow, and then, we don't know which direction people are going to go. And if 5% go one way and 5% go the other way, and they're all the same grade level. So anyhow.
Yeah, and there's implications for transportation. I mean, it just goes on and on. So
Yeah, so what we don't want to do is disrupt the stability that is starting to kind of come into the sense of momentum, and so we're doing what we can, but again, I think it'll be an important document for you to review, and we want to have it in front of you at the next meeting.
Sounds good. It's good to start thinking about it now.
Yeah. All right, let's turn it over to Irene, and she's going to pull up the transportation document, which we've been sharing with you around making a decision around how to modify that contract.
Okay, so obviously we've been trying to negotiate, or have been negotiating with the new transportation company, NRT, on a modified payment schedule for them based upon reduced services. And there's a lot of this chatter across the state with other districts about, services rendered and what we can pay under the Chapter 30 MGL. And so in negotiations, they have given us a proposal, as I've, brought before you before. And as you can see and hear as you read, they've indicated that, they can't just cut off, a substantial amount of funding, because they have all of these overhead charges that they're incurring based upon what they bid out for us, which is our bid was last year, and it was a cost per day. As you can see, purchase and financing of vehicles, which we have brand new buses and vehicles. There's insurance costs that goes associated with that, the bus maintenance services, employment of the mechanics, driver employment, safety training and licensing costs, the dispatchers, office and parking lot rental, utilities, camera systems, GPS and radio equipment, and monthly subscription services. So all of that has to be on the ready for us when we want them to be in service for us. So in addition, they have employed all of the Westborough, or most all of the Westborough drivers that were employed by First Student. And so I can say that they've been treating them very well. And the feedback I'm getting is that they're very happy and excited about being on the buses, the new buses, and feel pride for driving these new buses and so forth. So that being said, they have proposed that they would request payment of 50% for the first 10 days of the remote days that the governor has forgiven the schools on the days, and then 78% payment for the days that were not in the classroom until December 31st. So I have been in consult with Lisa and Steve, and there was a question posed that, would we be compromised with First Student if we would go forward with this? And the attorney indicated that no, we would not be, and that this is in alignment with a lot of other school districts, and that we should be assured that moving forward with this would be acceptable and reasonable. So I'm looking for your feedback on this, and whether, the other part of this is that we want to pay our drivers for 5 days of the week in order to retain them. And right now, the company is only paying them for 4 days until we resolve this contract. So, I'm asking for some feedback on this and some vote on this move forward?
Our drivers are definitely waiting. I received calls from several of them and emails. So I would, my recommendation as well is that I would seek your approval to the contract change and that we let Irene get moving on implementing it with the company.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or feedback on what was proposed here?
I just wanted to mention that unless there's a stimulus package after December 31st, we really can't address the second part of the year because that's why they're ending it on December 31st. So we don't know. And we did ask them that and they would not move forward until then. So we're sort of stuck in that place. And I think just so it was clear, you know, what you were saying about first student is that last spring, legally, we were allowed to not pay services unrendered. And therefore we did that, not paid those unrendered services while we were closed. That is not allowed at this point for the next, you know, after July 1st. So that's why we have what we have.
Thank you for that clarification.
And I also support that we, you know, need to do what has to happen in order to pay the drivers for 5 days.
So the 78% paying 78% for days when school is not in session, is that, for example, like the 2 weeks after Thanksgiving break, days like that? Okay, got it.
And Friday remote days for the transportation we don't have on that day, because we do have some transportation on the half day, but a little bit more limited.
I think it's like seven days that.
Yeah, because there are several Fridays that we're bringing cohorts in, so. Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts?
How did they arrive at 78%? I'm just curious.
It's the formula that they have used with all of what I had mentioned about the overhead charges that they have and the 180 days. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you know, that's what I thought, to cover their overhead charges.
Yeah, so what happens is they compile all of their charges and then divide it by 180 days. And then it's the cost per day per bus.
Okay, that makes sense, yeah.
All right, Sarah, did Steve send you any text messages with comments?
No, not as of right now. He did not.
So,
sorry.
So the other part of this is, and Steve and Lisa and I and the building committee have talked about the possibility of reaching out to the transportation company as to possibly help them out with the fails transporting of the subcontractors. We're just in the initial thought process of that, which might make up for some of the other charges as well. But that's just in the initial stages. And I see Steve, you're unmuted there. I don't know if you have some comments on that, but I mean, we can be creative with this, but right now they have to be on the ready for us. We have to have our drivers ready to drive our students, and we don't want to lose our drivers. And so this is, you know, and I'll read what the attorney has stated, if you would like me to. He says, I do not see a valid legal concern regarding negotiations with NRT of a lower price for maintaining availability in light of COVID disclosure, etc. The legislature temporarily exemption of districts from the constraints of GL Chapter 51, Section 56 regarding payment for services actually rendered expired by its terms on July 1st, 2020, and does not appear to have been extended or renewed. Accordingly, I believe that the law authorizes WPS to do this, given that Section 56 controls. In addition, I know from personal experience that several districts are having this type of negotiation. That doesn't mean that First Student won't raise an issue, but I believe the district's actions are lawful.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the memo as written.
Can I comment?
Oh, yeah, I think it's you made it.
Well, how about if does someone want to make a second and then we can have a discussion and then Steve can make his comments?
I'll second. This is Lisa. And
Okay, thanks. And then we'll have a discussion.
Okay, as is obvious that for those days where we would not be busing kids, we're going to pay 78% of those costs. So I would just wish to amend this discussion in terms of negotiation with the bus company, that in fact we count up the number of bus days at the rate, and that we use that excess cost, that is, we're paying 78% of something we don't receive, to alleviate the problem that we have with moving construction workers relative to the COVID-19 issues at the failed school. By doing that, we'll get benefit for the work, and we'll solve a neighborhood problem of where do we park the people. We did talk about that briefly in the last meeting, but I think we can get back some of the money for purpose and save the extra cost that's been calculated by our contractor or the construction manager in the order of $65,000. And so I think to do that, what you need to do is to negotiate bus days at that rate rather than just buses that aren't being used. That way we can calculate days that buses, in fact, would be from basically the end of this month through the beginning of the summer, perhaps next year. So that would be the only change in the motion I would request.
So it sounds like, Steve, you're suggesting to add that into somewhere in the language of this, like that.
Yeah, how we negotiate the terms. Yes.
Okay.
so I just want to make sure I understand. He's saying that of the 78% we're paying for services not rendered on those 7 days, that would compensate for the buses we would need for transportation of the employees at Vales that we're busing in because they can't use carpooling during this time. And it would just be a couple of runs in the morning and maybe the afternoon with the bus, and that we wouldn't have to pay additionally. Is that what you're saying? Wasn't that what he's saying? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. In other words, I'm saying they're saying that that the Fridays we don't have school, they're not busing anybody. Okay, and I'm saying we count up for the 170 days and the number of days we use buses and call those bus days. And if we're using other bus days, if you will, to do a different purpose, that in fact we'll get back 78% of what we otherwise would have lost. So it's a matter of how you phrase this, so that it can cover additional bus services, which is not necessarily busing kids. But this will go on in the morning and in the afternoon, basically until the COVID-19 restrictions are removed. And our cost of not doing this for the Fields project is going to be minimum of $65,000. So if we can agree that we'll calculate this on number of bus days used versus the number of bus days not used, then we can get most of our money back. And I can work with Irene to help raise.
Yeah.
including the 10 days that is at 50%. We're still paying 50% for not having any buses during those 10 days. So that can be added into that discussion.
And now we might have as many as 4 on those days providing a service, granted not busing kids, but otherwise doing the job.
Okay. So, so that's an amendment, I guess, to the motion. So,
Codicil. Let's call it a codicil.
okay. So we, is there any other discussion? Okay, so we will take a vote on the motion to approve as Irene had presented, and with the amendments and that Steve has asked us to also negotiate with them. Does that make sense for everyone? Okay, so we'll do a roll call vote for that. So Sarah.
Right, Dulé, yes.
Raghu.
Nandan, yes.
Lisa.
Edinburgh, yes.
Steve.
Durant, yes.
I think I heard a yes. And Vincent, yes. So that's 5-0 in approval of that. And Irene, when do you take this back to the bus company? Do you have another meeting set up with them?
I can do it whenever I set it up, so it can be immediate. So I can talk to them tomorrow.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good. I'm glad to do that for our drivers. And if it can work out for us with the construction workers, that'd be great too. All right. Thank you. Amber, anything else under the COVID-19 updates?
No, I think we can move on to capital planning, and I can do a quick transition towards it if you're ready.
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
All right. So we've been working on the capital planning implementation changes. You voted that policy, and the goal is that what we want to do is have Bob present to you the update that he's got. And I think it should focus on 2 key areas, which is the projects that we want to release that fall within underneath that expenditures of the capital spending committee, where they allot those funds. And we have one item that we would forward there, the Mill Pond trench drain. And Bob will walk you through that process and show you how he's cataloging that in his spreadsheets. And then the other goal was to provide a better overview of the range of capital projects that we track and manage. Those, you see, we gave you all of it, those that are kind of a regular rotation of the regular maintenance budget on one of the tabs. And then the other tab really being the area where you start to see an overview of major projects and our need to rotate those across the span of years. Bob has rough order of magnitude in there, and some he's got more detail on the magnitude is not. In the backup in the detailed discussion below gives you a nice picture of the planning of each of those. I'm really pleased to see the development of this document. I'll turn it over to Bob and Irene to kind of continue to share with you what we need to do. I think tonight we'll be seeking a vote on the release of the Mill Pond trench drain to move forward to capital, because that would be needing to cycle through discussion on their timetable. And I believe that the overview of the other potential warrant articles can be reviewed and doesn't need to be submitted yet. And I'll wait till Irene speaks to that afterwards. So I guess I would turn it over to Bob.
Thank you. Are we going to bring up the slide for the capital plan?
If you say pretty please, just joking. There it is.
Yeah, let's go. Let's go to the 5-year capital plan tab.
Okay.
Like the second or third tab in there. Okay, there it is. Thank you, Daniel.
Yep.
If you can enlarge it a little bit, it'd be helpful, if that's possible.
Sure. Yep.
Okay. So as Amber just mentioned, this item here in line item number 2, Mill Pond School trench drain and excavation behind the auditorium at the Mill Pond down the access road. When the building was first constructed way back in 2000, 2001 time span, thereabouts, apparently the excavation elevations were not correct. And as a result of those incorrect elevations, the water and the pitch is actually towards the school rather than away from the school at the back doors, the double doors at the bottom of the auditorium and stairwell. So in the past, they've had accumulation of water, and in the wintertime, snow and ice. And at one point, prior to my ever coming on board here, so I think it was 6 or 7 years ago, they made an effort to install a trench drain in front of one set of doors, and they took the drain pipe and they piped it into a dry well at the end of the walkway out in back there. So before Carl Balduff had left, this town engineer, we had an extensive meeting over there on a couple of occasions with Fryer Engineering and myself and Carl, and we determined that the best way to avoid the water entering in through the auditorium double doors or through the stairwell double doors, and to prevent ice from accumulating in water and slippage in the event there was a fire and emergency exit. The best way to take care of that would be to correct the elevation in back of the auditorium, add a trench drain, dig up the dry well that's currently attached to one of the trench drains, and pipe it into the detention pond that's out in back. And there are pipes already in place under the roadway that would need to be tapped into in order for it to correctly drain into the retention pond. So this, I think, is probably the most important. It's a safety item. It's been let go for quite a long time. They have made previous efforts, like I said, to try and correct it, and that really hasn't worked out well. So the way to take care of it is just to do it right, and that's what we're putting in for this time around. If we go down, we scroll down, Daniel, with the description under line 2 below, it pretty much sums up what I just said. So if there's any questions, I'll be happy to take the questions and see if I can answer them.
All right, any questions anyone has for that? Pretty straightforward. I think it's something, sounds like something that definitely needs to be done.
Yeah, it needs to be done. It is very straightforward. You know, we put in a rough order of magnitude estimate of $50,000, but, you know, my gut feeling is we can do it for less, but I hate to come back later and ask for more money. I'd rather, you know, ask for the 50 and save some rather than come back and say, geez, we need more.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we can take a vote on this tonight in order to move it forward to the Capital Planning Committee. And I think the rest of the information in this document is kind of informational at this time. But I think we should move forward with this one just to make sure that we get that in there. So is there someone who can make a motion for that?
This is Sarah. I can make a motion to for the trench drain excavation behind the auditorium at Mill Pond.
I'll second.
Okay, thanks.
Brett, second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, we'll do a roll call vote. We'll start with Sarah.
Dulé, yes.
Raghu.
Raghu Nandan, yes.
Lisa.
Edinburgh, yes.
Steve.
Brett, yes.
Right, and Vincent, yes. So that's 5-0 approved, and so we can bring that forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great.
So I think, Bob, if you want to, Daniel, pull up the other
Town warrant.
The 5-year.
warrant for the 5-year. I just want to make sure you can see this, and I want to talk through a little bit about how we've already modified this to give you a sense about how this design will work. And I think how the relationship with the Capital Planning Committee will work in terms of them having some, again, articulate knowledge from all municipal groups around what kind of projects they have on the horizon. So the rough order of magnitude of these needs to keep updated, and then we move things along with your guidance and final decisions. So Irene and Bob and I worked on this some, and already shifted several items over, knowing the financial complications of our current status with COVID deficits. And I would have Bob at least do a brief, because these are warrant articles that should be discussed for coming forward at Springtown meeting. And I want you to see them, and I want Bob to give you a highlight on each of them. And then I think we need to get the timeline of submission from the town and then work this forward through the capital committee and through our submission of your approvals of warrant articles. So there's a first pass, and I guess I would turn over to Bob and see if you could give us a succinct summary of this year's items.
Sure. So starting in the blue column under line 5, row 5, Armstrong boiler, there's 2 of them, and then there's rooftop units, classroom unit ventilators, and the associated controls that govern how the heating system operates at the Armstrong school. Apparently the school was built back in the late 1950s, I've been told, and in 1996, one of the 2 boilers had been replaced. The other boiler is the original, and there's considerable repairs each and every year to try and maintain that heating system so that continues to heat the school during the school year. So originally we had 5 million in that slot, but understanding, like Amber just mentioned, the impacts of COVID and the financial deficit with tax revenue and so forth, we moved that out, and we believe that by asking for $75,000 to maintain the system, we should be able to push it out at least another year or maybe even 2. So that's why we moved from 5 million, reduced, we took 75,000 out, put it in the first column, and moved the balance over to the right. Originally, we had in that $5 million, the line item number 6 below, Armstrong, remove and replace the walk-in freezer and cooler. That's a $40,000 item, unrelated. So we broke that out into 2 line items and moved that 40,000 from the original 5 million over to the second column, and you'll see that in row number 6. So that's the explanation for the boilers. And just so you know, in order to get that system up to snuff and remove and replace or repair or whatever needs to be done, we need to contract with an engineer, an engineering firm. So what I've done is I've talked with RMF Engineering, who is going to provide us a feasibility study at the Armstrong School for $5,000. They'll put together a feasibility study with their recommendations, and then if we want to continue further with them, they'll put together design documents that will be produced for a public bid, and we can go out to bid, because you really can't do anything to those systems in any of the schools until you really put it out for public bid and get a hard number. So tomorrow, actually, I'm planning on cutting a purchase order to RMF for $5,000 so they can proceed immediately with the study, so that at least we have that in our back pocket as a contingency plan. So that's that item.
So Bob, just to clarify one other piece, because you and I are really embedded in it a lot, that would be for just replacing, he pulled out just the second boiler that's original to the scope of the building. So all the controls and other types of things in the HVAC system is everything that rolls next forward into the separation of that 4,885,000 as rough order of magnitude. So the idea would be conceptually to go ahead and take the first step towards swapping out just the oldest original boiler, and that's what the 75 would be.
Well, I think it's more or less to maintain the boiler, not to remove and replace the second boiler. It's just for maintenance.
So you shifted just for the maintenance and
right. That's just to maintain the system, which could be the second boiler. It could be the controls, miscellaneous, whatever we anticipate to pop up, which is unforeseeable at this point. We just won't know. So, but we do think $75,000 will keep us covered.
All right, go through the other 2 if you could, the 3.
Yep. So the next one is line 8, which is the high school gym petition and replacement. There's 2 petitions that divide the 2 gymnasiums at the high school, and they've been there, the original installations. The wear and tear on these 2 petitions in both gymnasiums are really to a point now that they're really unsafe. The vendor that we've had that comes and maintains it a couple of times a year, and also they come out whenever there's an issue, have pretty much been very reluctant about coming out to do any further maintenance due to the liability. They don't want to take the liability to repair it in the event something falls and turns into a catastrophic event. So this, I think, in this column is the highest priority. We really need to address that. This is a price that we did receive from the vendor last spring, I believe, and I think that really needs to be addressed, because that is a safety issue. There's a lot of traffic in that gymnasium, as we all know. The students and faculty and staff always in the gymnasium, and it really needs to be taken care of. So that's that line item. Line item number 12, row 12, the high school softball field and dugouts and fencing. The softball field is adjacent to the tennis courts as you come into the high school. And anybody visiting the high school from other towns or whatever, the first field that they see is a softball field. And from everybody's viewpoint, the softball field is not at all up to the standards that it should be, and it doesn't meet the legal requirements under Title IX. So the athletic director, Johanna, and the principal at the high school has been very anxious to upgrade that area in order to bring it up to snuff with Title IX, in fairness to the girls and women that are at the school. And in order to do that, it requires, it's very close to the sidewalk and to the roadway. And in order to remedy the situation there and install dugouts and fencing, we need to excavate that entire area. And we're trying to stay below, from a design standpoint, a 3-foot retaining wall, because once you get into a 3-foot retaining wall, you need a professional engineering stamp from a structural engineer, which runs into a lot of expenses. And I think we can do it without raising the elevation to the extent that we need a 3-foot or larger retaining wall. So at first glance, it looks expensive, and I think it probably is padded in there. Again, we don't want to come back and ask for more money, but we believe that $200,000 or less will be enough money to re-excavate the field and the dugout area and install new fencing and bring that up to Title IX standards.
We are also hopeful that we could have some fundraising that will help us out with that.
Yep.
Yep. So then the next item is the Hastings sprinkler system, $750,000. So if you wouldn't mind, Daniel, if you'd scroll down to line 13 in the next page to the description. You might remember that.
Which page?
Just scroll down underneath this page, and there should be descriptions.
Just scroll down.
Scroll down on this page, yeah, to line 12.
I see. Item 13, line 44 here.
Yes, item 13, right. So you may recall, in order to comply with the building and fire department codes and regulations, we need to install a sprinkler system at Hastings in order to move forward with improving and upgrading the HVAC system. So in order to comply with the building and fire department codes, we can't move forward with the Hastings HVAC system unless we install a sprinkler system. That's just the laws, rules, and regulations. So the town had previously approved $760,000 for the Hastings sprinkler system during the October 21st, 2019 town meeting per Article 9. That was based upon the engineer's rough order of magnitude estimate that we could get it done for $260,000. Well, subsequent to that, it went out to public bid twice. And on both occasions, they came back almost double the engineer's estimate. So in order to move forward with that, we'd need to have an additional $750,000 requested from the town that would bring the total project cost to $1,260,000. So I just want everybody to be aware of that. And I'm sure, Steve, if you'd like to add to that or correct me or just validate what I've just described, that'd be appreciated.
So just a correction, it's $1,260,000.
Oh, I'm sorry, did I miss a zero?
Yeah, so did we. Yeah, you're right, Bob. That's right.
Okay.
So I guess when we look at this, if we scroll back to the top, and thank you, Bob, I feel like this document is beginning to get some teeth in it in terms of the layout and design, such that we can demonstrate a capacity to be doing long-term planning around projects and make smart decisions around how to rotate some forward, how to break some apart, how to do cost-saving measures. I'm going to want to go back and talk with Bob further about the Armstrong boiler, because when I left the meeting yesterday, I thought we were going to break out just a replacement of the older boiler and take that as a first step, as opposed to just maintaining the system. So I want to go back and debrief on that with Irene and Bill and Bob further. Again, maintenance on a warrant article is going to be different than a replacement. That I'm not sure I'm comfortable with the status of that description. So I want to go back and we're going to discuss that further. The other pieces I feel like are clear. You heard of potential fundraising on some of the softball field work to help us. And again, on some of these, we would get the detail as he's talking through it. So from here, what I think you want to take it as is information. Seek out talking with Bob and Irene and I on any of these. I think we're going to do a little bit more legwork on deadlines for submission. I'd like to hear some of the preliminary financial data on the town side when we start our financial meetings, and get a feeling for the temperature of what kind of more article weight's going to come forward, and then use that to kind of see where we are, how free cash comes in, all that type of stuff. So I think we just need to wait, and this is a first pass for you. So thank you, Bob, for the detail, and we'll be doing a lot more with this.
Sure, I just do have one more comment too, if we can go back to that, Daniel, for 1 minute.
Okay, one sec.
And I know we had a brief discussion, earlier today, Irene and myself actually, about, one of the concerns I have, when we build this strategy is, as we push these items out from the left-hand side to the right-hand side, and we compress those 5 years or 6 years or whatever it turns out to be, those figures are going to begin to stack up and become compressed towards the end of the 5 or 6 year period. And we're going to end up with an enormous amount of money at the bottom totals. So I just, we're putting these on, just to keep them on the radar, and it is going to be based on the financial status of the town. But we do have to think in terms of, this is going to catch up. The buildings are aging, and we keep pushing these things out, and eventually they're all going to stack up on top of one another. I just want to point that out so we all are aware of that. That's all.
Yeah, that's definitely an important point. And what we've learned from Steve too is that costs are escalating. So what we think it might cost this year or next year, that's not what it's going to cost 4 or 5 years from now. It's going to cost even more. So yeah, that's important. Thank you. This is super organized, and it's good to see, the priorities, and it's good to just be thinking about that as we head into budgets and thinking about Springtown meetings. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks. Okay, so moving right along, we are to the agenda item about voting on the resolutions for the MASC 2020 annual meeting. As a reminder, this is something that we started at our last meeting. Tonight, we're going to vote our level of support for the 10 resolutions that MASC will consider at their annual meeting on November 7th. And we can suggest any amendments we want to make to these resolutions as well. And Steve is our MASC delegate, and he'll bring our votes to the meeting. We will take a look at the resolutions. I'll just go through them in order. I'll read the title and the actual resolution, and then we can consider each one of them for a vote. And I think it will be easy if we just think about voting in favor of each one. And then we can vote either yes or no. So yes, you're in favor of it. No, you're not. And then any amendments that you want to make to the resolution. So the first one is about MCAS and high stakes testing. Therefore, be it resolved that MASC rejects the calls for the students of 2022 who missed their 10th grade MCAS testing to be required to make it up during the 2020-2021 school year or ever. We demand those students be held harmless for not taking the MCAS, and that their graduation requirements shall be determined by locally controlled voices of the school committee and school administration within the remaining graduation requirements of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And additionally, we reiterate our call for a moratorium on all high stakes testings for the 2020-2021 school year, so all students can benefit from their time being focused on direct instruction, and we urge the legislature to enact a moratorium on high stakes testing of 3 years. So I know last time Steve had mentioned he wasn't in agreement with the word demand. They say we demand those students be held harmless for not taking the MCAS. Steve, do you want to elaborate on that, or is that something you want to?
Yeah, I would suggest the word be request.
Request, okay. Any other comments or feedback? Sarah, did you have anything?
No, I was gonna say I'll make a motion to approve that resolution with Steve's amendment.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, great. And then we'll do a roll call vote, and you know the order that you need to go in, so I don't have to say it 10 times.
July, yes.
Nandan, yes.
Edinburgh, yes.
Steve,
Brett, yes.
Thank you. Vincent, yes. So we are in approval of that one. Resolution 2, COVID-19 state funding. Therefore, be it resolved that the state must guarantee every school district full reimbursement for whatever COVID-19 expenses are required. To follow state mandates, we must ensure a statewide school reopening that is safe, responsible, and equitable. There can be no unfunded mandates for COVID-19. We already voted this resolution for ourselves, but we can go ahead and vote on it for MASC as well. So I would make a motion that we vote in favor of this resolution.
I'll second.
All right, and then go ahead, Sarah, you can start us off.
Dulé, yes.
Nandan, yes.
Edinburgh, yes.
Brett, yes.
Vincent, yes. All right. Resolution 3, school committee anti-racism resolution. Again, another one that we've already tackled. Therefore, be it resolved that all the school districts in the Commonwealth should guarantee that racist practices are eradicated and diversity, equity, and inclusion is embedded in practice for our students, families, faculty, and staff. School committee members should ensure that our school culture and that of every district in the Commonwealth is anti-racist, and that acknowledges that all lives cannot matter until Black lives matter.
I'll make a motion to approve that resolution.
Right, and I will second. Yep, Steve can second that. And go ahead, Sarah.
Dulé, yes.
Nandan, yes.
Edinburgh, yes.
Brett, yes.
And Vincent, yes. Resolution 4, lowering the voting age for municipal elections. Therefore, be it resolved that the sponsors call upon the Massachusetts legislature to pass the Empower Act and take other means necessary to allow cities and towns to establish a minimum voting age of 16 years for all municipal elections. Comments or discussion on that?
I don't think I want to support this.
Yeah, I don't.
I agree with
Yeah.
I would support this. I mean, so just in reading what they were thinking about when it comes to this act, you know, I think it becomes part of the school system to educate our kids exactly what they're voting on. You know, we ask 16-year-olds to do quite a few things that are quite adult, and, you know, they have jobs, they pay taxes. I just think they're part of the process. So I guess I don't guess. I approve this. I wish it was 17.
Yeah.
I would have put 17 years old. Just
I know. I tend to agree with Lisa. Also, I don't know. Like Steve said, that other things have been tried. Maybe I wasn't around for those things, and you know, inherently, like Lisa said, that 16-year-olds can hold jobs. They, you know, certainly pay sales tax. They pay, you know, gas tax if they're driving or whatever. So maybe they're entitled to vote. I thought it was interesting that it's just local elections, though. And then I did have a question. I don't know if Steve or someone might know the answer. Is would that give them? Would they be able to participate in town meetings as well? I mean, I guess it would if they're registered voters, but I'm not really sure.
I would think so. I think you're right there.
Okay. And then also, I mean, so this is just a resolution for MASC, and then, you know, obviously it goes to the State House, and then I'm, you know, fairly certain, obviously it's left up to the local jurisdiction about whether this would, you know, pass or not. So there'd be obviously more discussion in town and a vote at town meeting as well to change our bylaws and everything like that. So it's not, you know, a done deal by our vote tonight by any stretch of anyone's imagination. So just to put that in perspective as well.
Yeah, and it's definitely tied to this Empower Act, which is already in the state legislature sitting there. So yeah.
But is it tied to the school committee? I mean, the schools at all? Why are we getting it? Why is MASC getting involved with this?
Well, I'm sure they were approached by the legislators who are, you know, trying to bring forward this. And I think that some of the whereas arguments for this is about the 2018 Act to Promote Civics Engagement mandated an increased emphasis on civics education in Massachusetts public schools. So it's like schools are responsible for teaching this, civics, voting, your rights as a citizen in your town. And so this may be a way to kind of put some practical pieces to what we're teaching our students in schools. So that's a connection there.
I don't know if Kyla, so
sorry.
now you have a student representative who I know has, very clear, well-developed opinions on a full range of things as a senior from Westborough. And I certainly, Kyla, a big part of what you get to do is carry student voice, and both your own personal voice as a member of the committee, but also anything about student voice. So I would just, I would invite you to make a contribution tonight. If you can also say, I'm just going to listen tonight. But I mean, if in listening to this, you have any thoughts, please just make sure you can unmute and contribute as well.
16 is like a really good age because like most of the people I know in my grade are like working, they have jobs, they pay taxes, even helping like pay their car bills. So I feel like 16 might be a bit young, but 17, like people are seniors and they have like the head on their shoulders and they can participate in the town since we're like all trying to make this better.
Thanks. All right, does someone want to make a motion for this one?
I would make a motion to approve resolution 4, amending it to age 17.
Yeah, I think that's a good amendment, actually. It's interesting.
I know Kyla Lisa suggested it, and Kyla kind of drove it home for me. So thank you, Kyla, for weighing in on that. So I would agree, or I would second that Lisa's motion as adding 17 instead of 16.
All right, let's take a vote on that. Sarah, you can start us off.
Dulé, yes.
I'm sorry, Nandan, no. I'll have to say no.
You don't have to apologize.
Edinburgh, yes.
Durrett, no.
Vincent, yes. All right, so that was 3-2.
You guys, I love that we had a split vote. I think it's good for us. Like, Kyla, usually we're very cohesive. So, and I don't vote. So I'm not a voting member as the superintendent, either as Daniel or Irene. So as employees, we represent the issues forward, but the committee is charged with the control of these items.
All right, resolution 5, supporting increased federal support and stimulus funding for public K-12 education. Therefore, be it resolved that MASC align with state superintendents of schools and urge the Massachusetts congressional delegation and state legislators to advocate for and approve additional education funding for our nation's public schools through the enactment of progressive tax legislation. There's a lot of description under this one too.
I make a motion to approve resolution 5.
Anybody know what progressive tax is?
What they mean by progressive tax legislation?
Yeah.
No, do you?
Well, frequently they want to tax the rich and give the money to the poor. That's one of the things that the progressive taxation means.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I mean, the traditional definition from economists is that is not to give it to the poor per se, but is to actually, you take a higher amount percentage from those who have more money. So and I don't think that's even phrased right, but it's so that there's regressive, which is everybody goes and gets the same tax when they go to the store. So if you're a millionaire and you buy, a refrigerator, and you're a poor person, you buy a refrigerator, you're both paying the same tax on that. But you, as a millionaire, can afford to pay more taxes than the person who's poor. So I think that's what they mean by regressive versus progressive. So progressive means,
Yeah, that's the way I interpret it.
Yeah.
Right, Steve, I think this one's been tried a couple times in a couple different ways, and this one they didn't actually write like wealth checks or anything like that on it as they, have in the past. You're right, it just says progressive, but there's no description in the whereases of what that would come from.
Yeah, well, I think progressive taxing has been on the table for a long time, and that's one of the reasons why they haven't defined what they mean. Really, I don't support progressive taxing. I would remove the word progressive and be able to, but otherwise no.
Would you replace the word progressive with something else?
Increase taxes for the purpose. Everybody then pays what they can.
Okay. So would you make an amendment to get rid of the word progressive?
I would support a motion, yes, and then I could support it.
Okay, so your motion would be to amend it so that there's not the word progressive in it.
Correct.
Okay. Is there a
I
second?
would make that motion if you would accept it.
Okay. You can make that.
I'll second Steve's motion.
Okay. Any other discussion on that? All right, Sarah, you want to start us off with a vote?
Julie, yes.
Nandan, yes.
Edinburgh, yes.
Durant, yes.
And Vincent, yes. So bring that amendment forward and see where that goes. Resolution 6, retention of Medicaid revenue. Therefore, be it resolved that MASC urges the general court to require that 100% of Medicaid reimbursements to cities and towns be provided in full amount to the public schools of each municipality through a school district revolving account to underwrite the cost of providing an adequate education.
So move.
I second. Sarah?
Julie, yes.
Nandan, yes.
Edinburgh, yes.
Durant, yes.
Vincent, yes. That's an easy one. Resolution 7, attempts by US DOE to direct funding to private schools. Therefore, be it resolved that MASC petition the Attorney General of Massachusetts to review and recommend to the Executive Office of Education and the Massachusetts Department of Elementary Education to review the formal language of such statutes that determine the distribution of federal funds to benefit economically disadvantaged students, and further, that the Attorney General provide legal guidance to state agencies in Massachusetts to implement such formulas based on the actual language and legislative intent of the statute, should that be in variance with any advisory issued by the United States Secretary of Education. I make a motion to support this.
I second.
Any other discussion? All right, Sarah.
Julie, yes.
Nandan, yes.
Edinburgh, yes.
Durant, yes.
All right, and Vincent, yes. Resolution 8, membership of a school committee member on the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. Therefore, be it resolved that MASC submit to the general court proposed legislation that MGL Chapter 15, Section 1E be revised as follows. They want to add in a line that says, one representative from a school committee from a list of 3 nominees provided by the Massachusetts Association of School Committees and 5 additional members.
I'll make a motion to support that resolution.
Second.
All right, Sarah.
Julie, yes.
Nandan, yes.
Edinburgh, yes.
Durant, yes.
Vincent, yes. Resolution 9, providing equity for sexual orientation, LGBTQ plus students, teachers, and staff. Therefore, be it resolved that MASC file legislation and petition our federal legislative delegation to also file legislation, which would have the effect of adding sexual orientation and gender identity to the list of protected classes in order to provide equity and support our LGBTQ plus students, teachers, and staff, and petition our legislative delegation.
I'll
make a-
move the motion.
I'll second.
Support.
Okay, so Raghu motions, Lisa seconds, Sarah,
Dule, yes.
And then yes.
Edinburgh, yes.
Steve.
Brett, yes.
All right, and Vincent, yes, that's an easy one to support. And resolution 10, relative to the monitoring of attendance of students during the pandemic. Therefore, be it resolved that MASC advocate for legislation and regulation that protect the rights of parents to withhold their children from school for reasons of their health status or health risk, and further, that MASC advocate for the regulations that hold districts accountable for the attendance of students, provide appropriate exemptions for students who experience or require extended absences from school due to health-related issues or concerns due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And further, that MASC petition the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education to waive all accountability requirements regarding attendance for the 2020-2021 school year, and that such regulations exempt districts from sanction status on the basis of attendance when such absences are related to a public health crisis, including COVID-19.
I didn't know how I felt about the second to last paragraph, to waive all accountability requirements regarding attendance. Does that sound, that's the only piece of it that I thought didn't.
And
does that mean? Does that mean that if you just would not have any accountability during a COVID year, or?
Are there must be like sort of state maybe accountability requirements.
So Daniel and I haven't talked about this, but I at least want to weigh in on the sense that around an equity-based discussion, students who struggle to stay connected, I believe that our vigilance as a district is required of us to continue to maintain the effort to make connection, to require attendance, and to sustain it. And I would think that we philosophically and morally would want, while it's difficult and extra work, it's a requirement. It's public education and required participation. So I'm not comfortable with relinquishing attendance. We certainly as a district will not. And we certainly held a firm stance of feeling good about the fact that we worked very, very hard to stay in contact with students last year and are doing so now as well. So I would just, for my voice, feel like it's an equity-based issue, and I wouldn't want to release districts from the responsibility of getting data on how many kids they let disappear. Because a lot of kids disappeared in a lot of communities that weren't participating. And I think that the accountability has to be there across the state. Just my opinion. Not for us, but for everybody, for us as well.
Yeah, I agree with that, Amber. The what I see here embedded is like some fear by the districts that are high poverty districts that the accountability formula is going to punish them for the high poverty rates in their districts. But I just think it's poorly worded. I just don't think that they're reaching the objective that they want by they put, you know, there is something in the formula in terms of accountability about attendance that currently does punish districts if their attendance is low. And I mean, I think, you know, it's debatable as to how the formula works, but I don't think that this resolution gets at the problem.
No, they have to try. I agree with you. They have to track all the data and in this crisis get very, very good data about where we are with students. And I certainly think that
I totally agree.
That's what we need.
And I think that, you know, there's some language in here about being flexible with attendance, and I totally get that. Like in that first bullet point, you know, to provide appropriate exemptions for students who require extended absences, and certainly we're going to do that, and we have done that, and we will do that. So I think that that's important to provide that flexibility. But I agree that accountability has to be there. We have to, you know, encourage those kids to be here with us. We need to go looking for them. We need to make sure that that is a standard that we have.
I liked the first bullet point too, but I thought the other two almost should have been taken out. Because the first one really talks about absence due to health, you know, related issues.
Yeah. Well, do you want to make a motion, Lisa, that, you know, we just amend the resolution that it's just that first bullet point?
Okay, I make a motion for Resolution 10 with the first bullet point only, excluding the last two.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really that second to last bullet, waive all accountability requirements.
Yeah.
Just the language there is inappropriate. Certainly we want students who need, for example, just as an example, our attendance work might be that the proof of attendance isn't rigid by time, but it's completion of work in your away day, as an example. Like students who need to be built a flexible schedule so they can get to work. Kids who need VHS so it can fit with their time plans. Like we want to have all of those types of performance flexibilities, but that bullet around all accountability requirements, I think needs to be edited out. Then you could take the majority of the essence of it.
Yeah, so we have Lisa's motion that is to amend the resolution, that it's just that first bullet point, and that we would amend that to eliminate the second two bullet points.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll second that. Any other discussion? All right, Sarah?
Dula, yes.
Nandan, yes.
Edinburgh, yes.
Right, I heard a yes from Steve, and Vincent, yes, so that's 5-0. So I'll organize all this and with our amendments and stuff, and get that to Andrea, and also I'll share it with you, Steve, because you're going to take this through the meeting. Thank you, everyone. All right, so yep. So moving on in our agenda, we're going to take a look at our superintendent's goals for the school year. So Amber, I'll turn it over to you.
So I'll continue to try to gain time for us tonight, so that you can move into executive session, and so that Kyla doesn't think that we have these super late meetings all the time. So this is a draft first pass, and that's when I'm offering it up to you for feedback such that they can be tweaked, changed, and amended as needed. So I designed them following the same framework as last year, although you'll see that I did add an overarching goal focus outside of the standards, indicating that this year everything is through the filter of navigating the COVID-19 impact to the district. And that includes leading, managing the impact through all the things that I outlined there. I do think I'll add budget just because I didn't put it in there, and I'll amend my own goals when I went back and looked at it. But should any of you pick that up, that would certainly be a piece I'm thinking I'm going to add. So it'd be E. Under instructional leadership, I gave you some target dates for you receiving the draft of the new strategic plan. I think that timeline will work for us such that it moves us forward, and it will encapsulate kind of a lot of the goals that you've heard us talk about, inclusive of equity-based anti-racist work. It encapsulates as well and kind of captures aspects around green approaches that you also talked about tonight. So those pieces are there, as well as the literacy and kind of the momentum around many of the projects that I think could shape the next several years of our work. Next, the curriculum focus picks out the three that we have to sustain, the two key. The continued inclusive practices that we're really working to develop even despite this really complex time. And then I'll look at the continued development of new literacy practices, grabbing the technology tools we're using, as well as the implementation of the DIBELS assessment, which was new in its start and drafted and now moved to full assessment implementation this year. Standard 3 being management and operations, a look at again, promoting the success of staff in a safe and efficient environment through the implementation of the projects that make us successful. Looking at the management of the implementation of supporting the implementation of the bus company work, completing the school resource officer review that we put on hold last year when we closed, supporting the FAILS construction work, and training cabinet offices on MUNIS updates and use of that system against the upgrades we did. Certainly a slim set of management goals, but given what we're facing this year, I wanted to kind of maintain the absolute must-dos, and certainly getting FAILS built does pull on aspects of time. family and community engagement, really looking to collaborate with town organizations to ensure the strength of town services. That looks at maintaining the safety committee work that I do, the master plan committee work, the CAP committee, Westborough Connects. Those are all things I'm engaged in, want to maintain those and stay plugged in, as well as continue to work with Irene on the continued revision of the budget book to kind of parallel the town's revision of their book in ways that we think complement each other well. And then lastly, around professional culture, and I place this under professional culture because it's pervasive across everything we do, our policies, our practices, our hiring, our curriculum, is looking at cultivating and maintaining the district culture that embraces and exemplifies equity and anti-racist practices, looking to connect the very diversity and equity committees in Westborough, looking to work with them. There's a whole variety of them. There's the town diversity committee, there's building-based diversity committees, there's We Cares, and a range of student groups that we want to activate to really engage more in-depth conversation with. Targeted goal to work with through the strategic plan and kind of a range of other things. Lastly, we're always centered on sustaining that work on relationships. It's not something you ever consider done. It requires constant maintenance. And now, as disconnected as we've been, it's just so much more important than ever to continue to innovate the ways that we can sustain meaningful relationships. So that's my first stab at a solid draft for you. I think it's what my focus will center on this year. I'm certainly willing to pick up a lens of additional work should you feel like you want to add it. I would encourage you to reach out to Kristen or to kind of process that with her, and then I'll sit down and meet with her and revise them as requested, and you can approve them at the next meeting. All right?
Great, that sounds like a plan. So if anyone has questions or things that you see in there that you want Amber to know about, just let me know, and then we will take a vote on these at our next meeting. Sounds good.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Okay.
And yeah, so just a reminder that the next meeting of the school committee will be Wednesday, October 21st at 6 p.m. So 2 weeks from today. Does someone have it in front of them to make a motion to move into executive session? Sarah's looking for it.
I move that we go into executive session.
You want, I can read the,
Oh, I got it. I got it. I make a motion to move into executive session, Chapter 30A, Section 21. In executive session pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Purpose 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, custodians, and school lunch workers, and under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 22G2, Purpose 7, to review and approve executive session minutes from July 22nd and August 31st executive sessions.
there you go. I'll second that.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Bob.
Good night, Bob. Thank you so much.
Enjoy your executive session. Bye-bye.
Yes.
I'll second. But we already did that in vote. We'll start with Sarah.
Yes.
Nandan, yes.
Edinburgh, yes.
Steve.
Right, yes.
Got it. And
Yeah.
Vincent, yes, 5-0. So we are in an executive session. Thank you, everyone.
So, yeah, so Kyla, you get